In 2001, the reality of aging Hollywood glamour was laid bare for a once famous actor. The fame died away and the glitz dimmed when the aging actor was dragged into a different kind of spotlight. This one was reserved for criminals.
I'm Kathy with a K.
And I'm Kathy with a C.
And this is Killer Destinations. Today's destination is Studio City, California. Studio City is a trendy San Fernando Valley enclave boasting a rich entertainment history and deep cultural roots. Located roughly 12 miles northwest of downtown LA, it got its name in 1927 when a film studio was built there. That historic site still operates today, playing host to popular shows and productions. And over the past 100 years, the studio has hosted legendary shows ranging from Gunsmoke to Seinfeld to Big Brother. And it is also the location of the exterior of the house that is seen on the Brady Bunch. Located just over the hill from Hollywood, the city has a number of major production lots, and as a consequence is home to many producers, directors, and rising stars. But in 2001, the reality of aging Hollywood glamour was laid bare. The fame died away and the glitz dimmed for a once famous actor who was dragged into a different kind of spotlight. This one was reserved for criminals.
On a Friday night in 2001 at 9:40 p.m., LAPD dispatch gets a frantic 911 call. The caller identified himself as a guy named Sean, and he's like, hey, somebody just banged on my door, and he was screaming, you gotta help me, you gotta help me. My wife, she's bleeding. They beat her up. Somebody mugged us or something. Police were immediately dispatched, and then he ran across the street to see if he could help. When he got there, there was a woman sitting in the passenger seat of a car, and she was breathing, but she was covered in blood. And the man who had come and banged on his door originally told Sean, I'm going to run down the street to a restaurant to see if anyone can help. So he took off running. Okay, so Kath, what happens is he gets to this restaurant and he's freaking out and he's begging people for help. Well, there was a woman inside the restaurant who happened to be a nurse. So she grabbed her friend and she goes, let's go. So they followed the man to his car. But by this time, the paramedics had already arrived and the nurse immediately jumped in to assist. So as the paramedics and the nurse were trying to keep this woman alive, the man who had run to get them was basically like slumped at the curb and crying. And at one point, Kathy actually vomited. So the woman is transported to the hospital where unfortunately she died. This brutal death made headlines the following morning across the U.S. as well as internationally. And it wasn't because the woman was famous, but her husband was. The victim was Bonny Bakley, and her husband was Michael Gubitosi. Now, he'd been acting in TV shows and movies since 1939 when he was just a little 6-year-old. Now, his name probably doesn't sound familiar to you because the world knows him as Robert Blake. And in 2001, when his wife was murdered, he was probably best known as the star of the TV show Beretta. Now, this was a show that ran from like 1975 to like 1978 or 79, something like that. And Robert Blake played this very streetwise, plainclothes police detective.
Wasn't that the 70s, though? Wasn't it like Kojak? Wasn't he the streetwise, tough guy?
Totally.
Or like the streets of San Francisco? Or,
yeah, exactly. Or, oh, how about the Mod Squad? Did you ever watch the Mod Squad?
No.
Like, you can watch these on reruns.
I probably should.
Anyway, so Beretta was, this sort of like studly, as you can, this New York street cop, like this gritty guy, but he had a frickin' pet cockatoo on his shoulder. So in the show, he would have this like pet cockatoo. I mean.
And did he like take it to crime scenes and interview people or just in the station?
Okay, I don't know, but I remember I have vague recollections because I used to watch reruns.
Right.
But I remember him being at crime scenes.
Which, by the way, speaking about the cockatoo, though, in doing research for this case, it had talked about like this bird was supposed to be a draw to the show, like one of its quirks, that would have people come back again and again. And apparently it was a really mean bird. And apparently they couldn't get another one because I guess what they started doing is just phasing it out. And by like the second year, it was never seen again, but nobody ever commented on it.
The cockatoo is like pecking at his eye.
Exactly.
Anyway, before Beretta, Robert Blake was best known after a 60-year acting career with more than 160 roles as the child who was in Our Gang. He was in The Little Rascals. And so that was like from 1939 to 1944. So it was the original black and white Little Rascals. Anyway, for those who don't know, it was about a group of mischievous children in a working class neighborhood. But after Beretta ended, Robert Blake played gritty roles in other TV series and things like that, but he was never really known for anything specific. You know what I mean?
He never reached that height of stardom again.
Correct. So Robert Blake was the man who ran to the restaurant to get help, who banged on this guy's door, who called 911, and it was his wife, Bonnie, who had been brutalized in the car. And at the time of Bonnie's death, she was 44 years old and Robert Blake was 67. And this was Robert's second wife. He'd been married to his first wife for 22 years and had 2 children with her. And Robert and Bonnie had been married only 2 months, and they had an 11-month-old daughter together.
It was early May 2001, as you said, when Robert's wife Bonnie was attacked and killed. And that night, Kath, what had happened, they'd gone to dinner at Vitello's, which was Robert's favorite Italian restaurant to go to for dinner. He lived in the area, and so he'd eaten there for at least 20 years and went there 2 to 3 times a week. And because of that, he knew the owners so well that they actually named his favorite pasta dish after him. And it was fusilli pasta with marinara sauce and sauteed spinach. But what I also thought was funny is I read an article from decades ago where one of the owners said they also had a special menu where if anybody wanted to add spinach to any dish, they'd say that they were going to Beretta it.
Oh, how funny.
Yes, because apparently spinach was Robert Blake's favorite thing to eat in the entire world.
Okay, the funny thing is like marinara and spinach, like you said, fusilli marinara and spinach. Like, no. If I'm going to have spinach, it's going to be a cream sauce.
I'm not a big fusilli pasta person either, but that to me just did not sound like a good meal.
Do you like spinach?
Yeah, I love spinach.
I love spinach.
Yeah. So that night when they went to dinner, Robert parked their car about a block and a half away from Vitello's, and then he and Bonnie walked the short distance to the restaurant. So they were there for a couple hours, and after paying their bill, they left the restaurant around 9:30. But it was just 10 minutes later that 911 was called to report that Bonnie had been attacked. So Kath, the following day, a still shocked Robert met with detectives and kind of walked them through what had happened that night. And even though he told the Good Samaritan to stay with his wife, he was going to run back to the restaurant for help, he told the police a little bit more detail. He said that when they were walking to their car after dinner, he realized he'd accidentally left his handgun in the booth they'd been sitting in at the restaurant, and he didn't want somebody to accidentally find it, have it accidentally go off or anything like that. So he's like, honey, I'm going to put you in the car, lock the doors, I'm running back to the restaurant. So he goes back to get it, and he made sure to tell police he actually had a concealed carry permit for it.
Which these are not necessarily easy to get.
No.
They're not handed out like candy.
He told police he didn't usually carry a gun, but he was concerned about his wife's safety because she had a stalker. And it was when he returned to his car that paramedics told him that his wife had been shot twice, once in her cheek and once in her shoulder. Now, because she'd been shot, they asked Robert, hey, are you willing to take a gunshot residue test? And he said, sure, happy to do it. And that test came back negative. But interestingly, remember, this is 2001. This was just 7 years after OJ. So as you can imagine, we've got another wife who's dead, and the press descended on the house. They surrounded the house. They parked themselves on the sidewalk to the point where he couldn't leave the house. And so this is on Saturday that this happens, the day after Bonnie was killed. On Sunday, fuel was added to the fire because detectives obtained a search warrant for Blake's home and spent much of Saturday afternoon combing through his property. So you can imagine the media frenzy that just exploded. And Kath, as you and I know, I was actually looking through newspapers.com to read some of the stuff. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's just like that one thing that keeps getting turned in every single article.
Right.
And everybody had a different theory. Everybody talked to somebody different. Oh, he had 12 guns in there. He had 1,200 guns in there. You know,
right.
It was crazy. And it got to be so bad, Kathy, that on Sunday, so 2 days after Bonnie was murdered, the LAPD actually came out with a statement and said Robert Blake was not a suspect and no murder weapon had been recovered at that point. But they also wouldn't comment on any progress in finding the perpetrator or when an arrest might be made. And then the autopsy had also been performed by this time, Kath, but authorities would not make public any of the results. So Robert's attorney was a man named Harland Braun.
And this guy was known for being sort of like the criminal defense attorney for Hollywood. And I remember him representing a couple people. Like, I want to say, oh my God, what was the basketball player who was super kooky and crazy?
Dennis Rodman?
I think he represented Dennis Rodman. I think he represented Gary Busey. Like, he was like the Hollywood go-to guy. And it wasn't just like, oh, Harlan Braun's the expensive it guy. No, he was good. He was good at what he did. He was aggressive. He was smart.
He also represented corrupt public officials.
He did. Any kind of high profile criminal case. And he was also
he like Robert Shapiro before Robert Shapiro was Robert Shapiro?
Actually, Robert Shapiro was Robert Shapiro at the time that Harlan Braun was representing Beretta.
Oh, that's true, because it was in the 90s.
Correct. Also, those like high level lawyers liked being in front of a microphone. They enjoyed the media attention, and they actually, they used it. They used it to, I'm not going to call it taint a jury pool. That's very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Sway a jury pool.
Like,
maybe give it a nudge.
It just was.
They were playing the game.
They were good at getting their message out in the media. So that was Harlan Braun.
Now, Harlan comes up after all this has been going on, and the LAPD is like, he's not a suspect, no weapon recovered, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that Harlan did confirm for the press, that authorities had taken the gun Robert had left at the restaurant to conduct ballistic tests on it. And Kath, it was just 10 days after Bonny's murder that the LAPD actually found the murder weapon in a dumpster that was just a block and a half away from where the shooting took place. And so obviously, if the police have Robert's gun that they had taken when they did the search warrant, this could not be the same gun. And they were able to confirm that the one found in the dumpster was the murder weapon because it matched the ballistics. So, of course, as the husband, Robert is going to be a suspect. But in addition to looking into Robert, detectives also began looking into Bonny's background. And Kath, as they did so, they realized that the killer could have been someone other than Robert because there were quite a few people who might want revenge on her. Bonny had been the perpetrator of several scams and left a bevy of upset men in her wake. And Kath, the way I kind of see this is that she was the Nigerian prince before the internet. And instead of targeting women, it was a Nigerian princess.
Princess,
right?
Exactly.
So Bonny grew up in rural New Jersey to a poor family, and she had a very challenging childhood. Her father was an alcoholic. She was raised by her grandmother. She did poorly in school academically. All the kids made fun of her, but she had a very strong sense of self. And she had big dreams of achieving fame and fortune. So she actually dropped out of high school at 15 and decided to go to New York City because she wanted to pursue a career in modeling and acting at the Barbizon School of Modeling.
I remember they used to do commercials on TV.
They did.
It was
a big deal.
It was a big deal.
I think it was one of the first schools, and that's what it classified itself as.
Right.
To offer how to be a model, how to be a star, how to be an actress.
I think they made you just walk around with a book on your head all day, screaming, stand up straight.
Exactly. So I was looking into it, and we know it was a big thing in the 80s and 90s. It was huge. And it was one of those things you want to be a model? It doesn't matter if people told you you're ugly.
Right.
Or that you have a face only a mother could love. Right. These were people going, we can make something of you. Just show up, come to New York. And it actually eventually spread nationwide. But it was come to New York for 10 classes. We're only going to charge you $1,500.
Right.
Which is around the equivalent of $8,000 today.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. But a lot of people did it, and they had several notable alumni, and they included people like Carmen Electra, Ryan Phillippe, who was Reese Witherspoon's first husband.
Is it Phillippe?
Yeah, it's Phillippe.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Yeah. Ryan. I thought it was Ryan Philippe or something.
Maybe it was at one time and it was anglicized. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. And former Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice.
I like Condi.
I do too. But one of the things she had said, and she had remarked on this in one of her books, and basically it was because she needed to have presence to be able to speak in public and be a good orator. And
so she went to Barbizon.
Yeah. Because they taught her the poise, they taught her the emoting skills, and it got her to Secretary of State.
She always did stand up straight.
She did. She had a book on her head.
Right.
Now, at Barbizon, this is kind of when Bonny started to ply her wares.
So to speak. Yep.
When she met an immigrant who was running out of time to stay in the U.S. without getting a green card, and he needed to get married, and Bonny agreed to marry him for a price. What happened, though, is that she almost immediately ended the marriage. And I don't know what it was then. Now I believe you have to be married for at least 3 years. But because she ended it so quickly, her new husband was deported.
Bye-bye.
And so that couldn't have left a really good impression of his first wife. And then a couple of years later, Kath, at age 21, Bonny actually married her second husband, who was also her first cousin. And they had 2 children, divorcing 5 years later. But Bonny was scrappy. She still had this goal in mind. She wanted to be famous. She wanted to make a lot of money. So here's the Nigerian princess part. Back in the day, before the internet, if people wanted to find like friends to have a book club with, or find a date, or even find a husband/wife, they would put ads in newspapers or in the backs of magazines.
Yep.
Many magazines had them, and people would just go in there and be like, I'm so-and-so looking to meet so-and-so. I love tennis. I love long walks on the beach. And how much money do you have?
Right.
And I think that was implied. But she didn't put them in any normal magazine or newspaper. She put them in swingers magazines.
Oh.
So she was going straight to the point. But here's the thing. She would take out multiple ads using multiple names and different professions. And in them, she would have a variety of reasons she needed money. She needed help paying her college tuition. She needed her car to go to work, but she needed repair work on her engine. And of course, men were looking in the ads for the same reason she had placed hers. So any men who responded to Bonny, she would send them sexy pictures of herself.
Hi, this is Bonny. Thank you so much. Here's a photo of me. And it's like a boudoir photo.
Exactly. She's like, you don't know me and you don't even know if this is actually me.
But here I am.
Exactly. But they would then take the bait. And because all of the men responded to this, she then started a mail order business sending nude pictures, not to these men, but she would advertise in the magazines, and she would send nude pictures of women, including herself, to men. So like they didn't have to buy Playboy or Penthouse or anything.
Right.
They could get her to very discreetly in brown paper packaging, I'm sure.
You didn't have to walk into a liquor store and go through the embarrassment of putting your like naked girl magazines on the counter.
Those were the days before they put the brown paper over them. That was before Tipper Gore got a hold of them. But anyways, so this is all happening in the late 70s, early 80s. In the late 80s, when she was in her 30s, Bonny decided she was going to move to Memphis because she wanted to date rock and roll star Jerry Lee Lewis. And Kath, part of me thinks the reason she was so obsessed with Jerry Lee Lewis is, do you remember this? His very first wife was his third cousin, and she was 13 at the time.
Okay. No, I absolutely 1,000% do not remember that. Why would I know? That's disgusting.
Because when that movie Great Balls of Fire came out,
I never saw it.
Oh, it was a good movie.
Was it?
Oh, it was. Well, other than the teenage bride who was related to
him. It
was
a Be on a TS with a teenage bride?
Exactly.
Wow. Jerry.
But anyway, so yeah, she moves to Memphis. She's in her mid-30s. He's in his mid-50s. And she actually accomplished what she set out to do, and she started dating him.
That's incredible.
And his manager had said something to a newspaper after she was killed that he's like, I don't know how she did it, but man, that girl just would not stop. Like she just kept poking and poking and poking. And eventually you're like, just come on through.
Persistence pays.
So she soon becomes pregnant and told Jerry Lee Lewis, this is your baby. And so when the baby was born, it was a little girl, and she also named her Jerry Lee, just spelling Jerry, Jeri, as opposed to how he spelled it, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, homage to her pops. However, that wasn't her father.
Ruh-roh.
Jerry Lee Lewis demanded a paternity test, and it came back, and I believe it was Maury Povich who said, you are not the father.
Maury Povich. I hate the Maury Povich show. I hate watching women sit there as men celebrate the fact that they are not the fathers of the baby.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being that kid later, seeing that video, because nothing ever goes away anymore, you know? And
or they find out they are the father. They're like,
It's so gross. It's the worst of humanity.
So, Kath, obviously Bonny was trying to marry a wealthy celebrity.
Correct.
But by this point, even though Jerry Lee Lewis was not father to little baby girl Jerry Lee, Bonny's nude photo mail order business and her Lonely Hearts scams had provided enough money to buy several houses in Memphis and a house outside of LA.
That is impressive in a very sad and disgusting way.
Agreed.
You know?
Absolutely
but that's like,
agreed.
That's a woman on a mission.
Yeah. And she succeeded.
Like grasping.
Right.
You know, but yeah, like she bought houses.
So Bonny then adioses out of Tennessee and moves to LA because she still wants to be a singer and actor despite getting shot down in New York numerous times. And like New York, she was unsuccessful. So she set her sights on finding a big star to date and decided on movie star and member of the Rat Pack, Dean Martin, who was 78 years old at the time.
Oh, Bonnie.
I'm wondering if he was just easy to spot. You know what I mean?
Was he just low-hanging fruit at that point?
I think it had to have been.
I don't think so. Like, he was performing well into his older years. But whatever, she's young and she's attractive and
I'm assuming his wife had died by that point.
Yeah, we don't know.
But before she could seal the deal, he passed away. But her next pursuit was Christian Brando. And Kath, he was the oldest son of Marlon Brando. And if people don't know who Marlon Brando is, he was the lead role in The Godfather. And if you haven't seen The Godfather, you have to watch it.
Right.
Excellent movie. But Christian Brando was actually known to be very troubled. He had a hair trigger on his temper. He took too many drugs. He drank too much. And it was about a year before Bonny arrived in LA that Christian fatally shot the boyfriend of his half-sister, Cheyenne. What happened is they were all in the same house together, and Cheyenne told Christian that this boyfriend, who was the father of her child, was physically abusing her. So Christian got a gun and shot him and killed him. Christian wound up pleading guilty to manslaughter, spends 5 years in prison, and Bonny is clearly following the celebrity circuit, and she sees that he's in prison, and so she sends him nude photos of herself as a how do you do?
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Bonny.
Exactly.
Here's one of my infamous boudoir photos.
I like long walks on the beach.
Right.
Puppy
Exactly.
dogs.
Exactly. Kathy and I both know somebody who used to place ads to meet women. I think we talked about this on a podcast previously.
We did.
And he would say, firefighter looking for a woman who loves long walks on the beach, Labrador retrievers, and I mean, all this nonsense. It was like,
And then you meet him and you're like, what?
Oh, wait, I just met a serial killer.
I left my iron on. I'm going to have to go.
I gotta go.
Anyway, so after she does this, they start corresponding. They didn't actually meet in person until he got out of jail 6 years later in 1996. But once he was out, they actually kept dating. But it was while she was seeing Christian Brando in 1999 that she also started seeing Robert Blake after the two met at a jazz club. And she had approached him.
She must have recognized him, even though at this point, Robert Blake, aka Beretta, I mean, he looks like his Beretta self, except he had white hair.
Exactly. He was 65 at the time.
Right. So almost a year after Bonny started dating Robert Blake, Bonny gave birth to a baby girl, and she named the baby after her father. Not Bonny's father, the baby's father. So she named her daughter, not Jerry Lee, but Christian Shannon Brando. So she is basically proclaiming to the world that Christian Brando is the baby's father. However, Christian was like, nay, nay, fair maiden, I don't think so. Let's do a paternity test. The test actually revealed that Robert Blake was the father. So now Bonny's like, ruh-roh, I just named the baby after Christian Brando. And so Robert Blake was like, no, my daughter's not going to be named after Christian Brando. You can change her name. So the name of the baby was legally changed to Rose. And a few months later, in November 2000, Robert and Bonny got married. It was his second marriage and her 10th. So fast forward, Bonny is murdered, and the police are looking into several potential suspects. And of course, Kath already said the husband is always a suspect. But police began looking at Christian Brando and the other men that Bonny had been in contact with through her Lonely Hearts business. And they also looked into her life with Robert Blake and their daughter Rose. In doing so, they issued a second search warrant for his residence. Now, on Robert Blake's property, they had a guest house, and it turns out that Bonny lived there or stayed in the guest house quite often, in fact, more frequently than she did the main house. So while they were searching the home's guest house, where Bonny often slept, police found tapes. These tapes showed that Bonny had a habit of recording phone calls. So police, of course, helped themselves to the tape. Thank you for the evidence. We appreciate it. And Robert can be heard on the tapes accusing Bonny of double-crossing him because she'd promised to have an abortion. He also resented her for marrying him after learning she was pregnant. But Robert wanted full custody of the baby without being tied to Bonny anymore. So naturally, they focused on Robert Blake despite the fact that they were unable to link him or anyone else to the murder weapon. So in May 2002, and this is 11 months after Bonny Lee Bakley was killed, Robert Blake was arrested for her murder. He was taken into custody at his sister's home, unexpectedly, as you can imagine, and she lived in the upscale Hidden Hills neighborhood.
And of course, I think most people know it is where the Kardashians all live.
Exactly. That's Kim, our law partner.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. And if you guys don't follow us on social media, you need to, because we did just talk about the Mackenzie Shirilla case. This was our case episode 207 that we had done back in August, and she brought Kim into the whole thing.
Oh.
So you got to give it a listen if you haven't already.
Exactly.
So Kathy, Harlan Braun actually was in an interview, and he said he got a phone call from the police just as they were going through the guard gate. One of the police detectives called him and was like, let your boy know that we're about to get to the house and he needs to come out and give himself up. And he was like, whoa, can't you just give him a second? Let him make sure like his daughter has a place to go or something like that. And they're like, nope, we're going. Make sure he's walking out with his hands up and nothing in his pockets. And so Harlan called Robert Blake and he was like, they're here. And he's like, can I get shoes on? Can I change my clothes? And he was like, you walk out that front door right now. You don't know how they're going to come in if they don't know what you're up to. So little Rose stayed with the sister and he toddled on off to jail.
And because he had been Beretta in so many movie scenes, he understood how it happened.
Exactly.
Like he walked out, he assumed the position.
He knew better than probably most of the police officers, right. Or at least any of the new ones. And Kathy, what was interesting, so, we've already talked about, have we brought up OJ twice now, I think?
Yeah.
Okay, here's number 3.
Well, maybe once.
So whichever one it is, once again, there are shades a la OJ and his freeway chase because it was clear that the police had tipped off reporters. Because on the drive from Hidden Hills to the downtown LA jail, which is about 30 miles, so if you're in LA traffic, you're looking at like an hour,
right?
Maybe 2.
Right.
News helicopters were following them.
You know what? I wonder if Harlan Braun tipped him off.
Oh my God. I could actually see that. Huh. I assumed it was police, but you've got one there.
I have a quick OJ story. Back in the day, it was probably, like shortly after he went on his white Bronco.
The juice is loose?
Yeah, run across America.
Or the 405, one of the two.
With AC Cowlings. I go down to Tijuana with like 3 other couples or something like that. It is the very first, it's the one and only time I actually did karaoke because I did not realize that karaoke, you actually had to have a good voice.
But you sing well.
No,
yes, you do.
Not
our
really.
Listeners will tell you it's
not
true.
Not really.
We
but
want to
anyway,
hear from the fans. Come on, let me know.
So I assumed that the microphone had one of those like synthesizers or one of those things that like
voice altering
Miley Cyrus uses. You know what I mean? And so, so I was like, I'm going to sound good.
Auto-tune?
Yeah. So I choose a terrible song. It was an Irish song and it was too fast. It was
in
like,
Mexico?
Yeah, it was dumb. But we were in Tijuana and we were in Rosarito actually. Anyway, so I get booed off the stage because I can't keep up with the tune. It was like, my name is McNamara. I'm the leader of the band. Anyway, terrible karaoke song. And all of a sudden, like I realized like, oh my God, this is my own voice. Everybody was like, boo, it was terrible.
Wow.
So I sat down in shame and then our friend Mark takes the microphone and he reenacts the AC Cowlings and OJ Simpson 911 call.
That is awesome.
Where he goes, this is AC. I got OJ in the car. And so like he goes through the whole dialogue with the 911 operator and everyone is like, whoa, like it was the funniest thing.
Oh, I love that.
But every time I like hear about like the juice is loose and you know, the whole thing, I think of Mark in Rosarito Beach Hotel doing karaoke.
So back to Beretta, otherwise known as Robert Blake, and being chased down the freeway by a bunch of news helicopters, either brought in by the police or his own attorney. We don't know which. Now, as soon as he gets to the jail, though, Kath, and it isn't quite as bad as the Twin Towers, which is the sheriff's jail. This is LAPD jail. It's still not going to be good. So they actually put him in the hospital section instead of Gen Pop to protect him. But they then got a bunch of reporters who were like, what happened to him when you arrested him? Is he sick? Did he get hurt? Because he's in the hospital section.
Oh, how funny.
And they're like, he's fine. We're just protecting him. And you know, they were like,
yeah. What have you done?
Okay, we already counted our 2 shades of OJ in the Beretta arrest. Another echo of OJ happened when LA TV stations broke into regular programming to do a live broadcast of the LAPD press conference that was held to announce his arrest. The press conference started with an LAPD bigwig getting right to the point. He got up to the microphone and said, Robert Blake shot Bonny Bakley to death. He then said, we believe that Robert Blake had contempt for Bonny Bakley and he felt he was trapped in a marriage he wanted no part of. But then they dropped a bombshell, Kath. The LAPD said they didn't believe Robert pulled the trigger, but rather hired a hitman. And it wasn't just one, actually, it turns out, but two. Then LAPD Chief Bernard Parks said the investigation was one of the most intensive in the department's history, which is ironic considering not only did you have OJ, but you had the Black Dahlia, you had the Manson murders, you had a whole bunch of stuff that came beforehand.
Right. Freeway killer. I mean, like a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Richard Ramirez, you know.
All the serial killers.
Exactly.
But nope, they were saving it up and waiting for this. So he added that officers traveled to more than 20 states, interviewed more than 150 witnesses, checked out more than 150 tips, and sifted through more than 900 pieces of evidence. The chief declared, all other suspects have been eliminated. The LAPD case has developed both physical and substantial circumstantial evidence that Robert Blake killed Bonny Lee Bakley. But Kathy, what happened is that the same day that Robert was arrested, his bodyguard, it was a man named Earl Caldwell, was also arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, even though police had been able to confirm that he was out of town on the night Bonny was killed. So after his arrest, Robert Blake was charged with 1 count of murder with the special circumstance of lying in wait and 2 counts of solicitation of murder in connection with Bonny's death. He was actually held for 10 months behind bars before a judge finally granted him bail. The 2 counts of solicitation were for the 2 hitmen that the police alleged Robert Blake had hired to kill his wife. And so, Kathy, what's interesting is that these are totally unrelated to Earl Caldwell, who, as we said, was Robert's bodyguard. Before Robert Blake's arrest, the prosecutor's office had put together a grand jury because they wanted to have them indict Robert Blake. However, they also wanted Earl Caldwell to turn on Blake and testify before the grand jury. But what happened was when they arrested Earl Caldwell and charged him with accessory to murder, but did not give him immunity. So when you're put up in a grand jury and you've got an arrest on you right now, you're not going to sit there and tell the grand jury anything because, as we've talked about in many, many, many episodes, you can't defend yourself before a grand jury.
Right.
The prosecution gets to present the case they want.
And you have the right not to incriminate yourself.
Exactly. And so Earl Caldwell said, see ya, be ya, I'm having nothing to do with this grand jury. And as a result, they were never able to indict Robert Blake. The LAPD finally arrested Robert Blake after 2 stuntmen came forward and said, hi, Robert Blake hired us to kill his wife, but we never did it. So we knew he was going to do it, but we didn't do it. So don't arrest us for murder, but we can tell you that that's what he was trying to do.
So those were the 2 counts of solicitation.
Correct. So the criminal trial began in December of 2004. This is 3.5 years after Bonny Bakley was murdered. The prosecution, of course, argued that Robert tried to hire others to kill his wife and did it himself when he couldn't find anyone to carry out the murder. So they had no physical evidence on Robert. But of course, after these stuntmen said, no, we'll testify and tell you that he'd been trying to hire people, but couldn't find anyone, so he had to have done it himself. We told you that he had passed a gunshot residue test, which he did, but a week or so after the murder, this is a week or so after the gunshot residue test was conducted and found to be clean, one of the forensic techs said, you can get rid of gunshot residue just by wiping your hands on your pants. So they're like, you know what, let's test his hands again. And so on one hand, they found 3 minute particles that contained elements that could be found in gunshot residue. So it wasn't gunshot residue.
And they admitted that at trial?
They did.
That was the physical evidence.
Exactly.
So what were they saying about the bodyguard who they knew was out of town on the night of the murder? Is he still in the case at the time that Robert Blake went to trial?
He's not.
Okay, so they dismissed him.
Correct. So with the particles of potential gunshot residue that was introduced, the prosecution relied heavily on 2 Hollywood stuntmen, who we've mentioned, who testified that Blake attempted to hire them to kill Bonny. And as we said, these are the 2 that prompted the arrest of Robert Blake. So these men got on the stand. They told their story about how Robert had come up to them, said he had a job for them. Could he pay the money? They said no. And once she was killed, they were like, oh, we need to go to the police because we're upstanding stuntmen. But the defense aggressively discredited the 2 stuntmen by exposing their heavy histories of cocaine and methamphetamine use, painting them as delusional and unreliable. In addition, the son of one of these stuntmen testified for the defense that his father had told him that Robert Blake was going to pay him money for a job, but it wasn't to kill Bonny. It was to protect the couple from a stalker, which of course is what Robert had told police the night Bonny was killed, saying the reason he was carrying a gun was because she was afraid because they'd been contacted by a stalker. The prosecution's case was also hindered, of course, by the fact that forensic experts could not place the murder weapon in Robert's hands, despite the particles that could belong to gunshot residue. Crucially, no blood belonging to Bonny was found on Robert immediately after the murder, making the physical evidence against him almost entirely circumstantial. Now, 4 months later, in March 2005, the jury acquitted Robert Blake of the murder of Bonny Bakley. The jury also deadlocked 11-1 in favor of acquitting Robert on the murder solicitation counts.
Just 8 months after being acquitted of his wife's murder, Robert Blake faced another round of legal proceedings. In another parallel to OJ,
I swear, it's like OJ Part 2.
I know. Bonny's children filed a wrongful death civil suit against him. And so, as you guys know, the difference between criminal and civil is the burden of proof. In the criminal trial, conviction has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's a pretty darn high standard. A civil jury, the burden of proof is simply preponderance of the evidence, which essentially means anything over 50%. So it's a very reduced burden of proof. And in the civil trial, Robert Blake had to take the stand. So remember now, there's no concern about double jeopardy because he was acquitted. He was specifically found not guilty for the murder, and he can't be tried again for it. So there's really no reason to get a protective order precluding him from testifying in the civil case. So I'm sure his deposition was taken. I'm sure he took the stand at trial. So when he took the stand at the civil trial, he appeared to the jury to be irreverent and combative.
Well, he was a hardened New York police detective.
Exactly. So after 8 days of deliberation, the civil jury found him liable for the wrongful death of his wife, Bonny Bakley. And they ordered him to pay the children $30 million in damages. Now, Kath, his little girl, his daughter with Bonny, little Rose, was 6 at the time. So, of course, she had no idea what was going on. And she was being raised by Robert's adult daughter. So anyway, little Rose was included as a recipient of the damages. On appeal, the award was reduced to $15 million. And after that, the parties reached a confidential settlement. But it wasn't paid because Robert Blake filed bankruptcy in 2005.
Didn't OJ file bankruptcy?
Right. It's funny, the parallels.
It really is.
Crazy. So the court, when you file bankruptcy, the bankruptcy judge basically stays any civil actions against you, meaning you can't collect your debt. And then in Robert Blake's case, like the bankruptcy ended and basically he had no money. He had no assets. And so in 2023, when he died from heart disease, the people who were part of the settlement agreement collected some of their money, but it was only a fraction of the settlement. But because the settlement was confidential, we don't know what the numbers are. Now, Robert and Bonny's daughter, who is now 26, was raised by her half-sister, as we said. Throughout her childhood, she was involved in many activities, and her half-sister who was raising her did the best she could to provide her with a modicum of normalcy. But as you can imagine, as a young woman, she suffered from anxiety and depression due to her family issues.
Right.
And so when she was 18, and again, we said she was 26. So when she was 18, she reignited a relationship with her father, Robert, but they agreed not to discuss her mother's murder. And at the time of his death, the two were still in touch. And today, Rose is an actor and advocates for mental health awareness. And she's actually very open now about talking about her own childhood trauma. And the shooting death of Bonny Lee Bakley remains officially unsolved.